It's Sunday morning, 2007. Joel Osteen steps onto the stage at Lakewood Church in Houston, and 20,000 people rise to their feet. The roar is deafening. Camera crews capture every angle. The production budget rivals a primetime television show. This is the megachurch at its zenith, an empire of faith that generates $43 million annually. Flash forward to today, and that same building is quieter. Attendance has dropped. The model that seemed invincible is cracking at the foundations. But why? The story begins not in a church, but in a shopping mall. In 1955, a marketing executive named Victor Gruen designed the first enclosed shopping mall in Edina, Minnesota. His vision was revolutionary: create a space where people congregate, spend time, and become part of a community. The megachurch borrowed this exact blueprint. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional design. Robert Schuller saw the future before anyone else. In 1955, the same year Gruen opened his mall, Schuller stood in the Orange Drive-In Theater in Garden Grove, California, and preached to people sitting in their cars. He understood something fundamental about post-war America. Convenience mattered more than tradition. Within 15 years, he built the Crystal Cathedral, a gleaming glass structure that cost $18 million in 1980 money. That's over $67 million today. The building seated 2,736 people, featured a massive pipe organ with over 16,000 pipes, and became a tourist attraction. Schuller pioneered the televangelist model, broadcasting Hour of Power to millions. He proved that religion could scale like a business. The formula was simple but effective. Location mattered first. Megachurches didn't build in city centers where land was expensive and parking was limited. They built in suburbs near highway exits, with massive parking lots that could accommodate thousands of cars. Second, they offered amenities: coffee shops, bookstores, gyms, childcare facilities, even food courts. The church became a destination, not just a Sunday obligation. Third, they depoliticized the message on the surface while maintaining conservative theology underneath. The focus shifted from sin and damnation to prosperity and personal fulfillment. Bill Hybels took this model and perfected it. Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington, Illinois, opened in 1975 in a rented movie theater. By 2018, it was one of the most influential megachurches in America, with over 25,000 attendees weekly. Hybels created the seeker-sensitive movement, designing services specifically for people who weren't religious. Contemporary music replaced hymns. Sermons became motivational talks with minimal theological complexity. Drama sketches illustrated biblical principles. It worked spectacularly. Over 12,000 churches worldwide adopted the Willow Creek model. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. In 2018, the Chicago Tribune published allegations against Hybels. Multiple women accused him of sexual misconduct spanning decades. The investigation revealed a pattern: private meetings, inappropriate comments, unwanted touching. Hybels resigned. The church's attendance plummeted. The carefully constructed image shattered overnight. What seemed like an isolated scandal was actually a preview of a systemic crisis. Hey everyone, Professor Archive here. The story you're hearing today represents months of research into one of the most significant cultural shifts happening in America right now. If you're finding this content valuable, hitting that like button helps tremendously. And if you want to go a step further, a super thanks would absolutely make my day and helps keep this channel producing in-depth content like this. Now, I'm curious, where are you watching this from and what time is it where you are? Drop a comment below. I love seeing where our community spans across the globe. All right, back to the story. The megachurch era reached its statistical peak between 2000 and 2007. In 2000, there were roughly 350 megachurches in America, defined as Protestant churches with weekly attendance exceeding 2,000. By 2007, that number had grown to roughly 1,300. The growth seemed unstoppable. These churches generated enormous revenue. Lakewood Church under Joel Osteen brought in over $70 million annually at its peak. Elevation Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, founded by Stephen Furtick in 2006, grew to 20,000 members within a decade and generated over $100 million in revenue by 2018. The money funded extraordinary facilities. Life Church in Oklahoma, led by Craig Groeschel, operates across 40 locations in multiple states. Their production values rival professional entertainment companies. They pioneered multi-site ministry, broadcasting one pastor's sermon simultaneously to dozens of campuses via high-definition video. The technology was impressive. The theology became secondary. Mark Driscoll embodied the megachurch's aggressive expansion phase. His Mars Hill Church in Seattle launched in 1996 with just 12 people meeting in his living room. By 2013, it had 15 locations across 5 states and drew 13,000 attendees weekly. Driscoll cultivated a reformed bad boy image, swearing from the pulpit, discussing sex explicitly, and attacking other pastors publicly. He called male pastors who weren't aggressive effeminate. His misogyny wasn't hidden, it was marketed, and it worked until it didn't. In 2014, everything collapsed. A talk show host named Janet Mefford accused Driscoll of plagiarism during a radio interview. The accusation opened a floodgate. Deeper investigations revealed that Mars Hill had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars gaming book sales to get Driscoll's Real Marriage onto the New York Times bestseller list. They bought over 6,000 copies through a marketing firm called Result Source, creating artificial demand. The ethical breach was clear, but the financial revelations were worse. Former members described a culture of bullying, spiritual abuse, and financial opacity. 21 former pastors signed a letter detailing Driscoll's abusive behavior. The church imploded. By 2015, Mars Hill officially dissolved, leaving financial chaos and traumatized former members in its wake. Carl Lentz represented the megachurch's evolution into celebrity culture. As lead pastor of Hillsong Church's New York City campus, Lentz baptized Justin Bieber, counseled Kevin Durant, and hung out with various Kardashians. He dressed in designer streetwear, styled his hair meticulously, and looked more like a personal trainer than a traditional pastor. Hillsong's services resembled concerts. The music was professionally produced, the lighting cinematic, the atmosphere electric. Attendance soared to 7,000 in New York alone. But in November 2020, Hillsong fired Lentz for moral failures, which turned out to be multiple affairs and a pattern of dishonesty. The subsequent investigation revealed deeper problems: misuse of church funds, lack of financial accountability, and a leadership culture that prioritized image over integrity. Brian Houston, Hillsong's global leader, resigned in 2022 amid his own misconduct allegations. The church that had defined cool Christianity was revealed as ethically compromised. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Jerry Falwell Jr., president of Liberty University and son of the famous televangelist, resigned in 2020 after revelations about his wife's affair with a pool attendant and allegations that Falwell watched. Ravi Zacharias, one of Christianity's most respected apologists, died in 2020, and posthumous investigations revealed he had sexually abused numerous women over decades, using ministry funds to pay for silence. James McDonald, fired from Harvest Bible Chapel in 2019, was recorded making violent and vulgar statements about critics. The megachurch model wasn't just producing scandals, it seemed to enable them. Why? The structural problems were baked into the model from the beginning. First, accountability was minimal. Unlike traditional denominations with hierarchical oversight, most megachurches operated independently. The senior pastor often controlled the board, hiring friends and loyalists who wouldn't challenge decisions. Financial transparency was voluntary and rare. Second, the celebrity pastor model created dangerous power dynamics. When thousands of people treat you like a rock star, when your face is on billboards, when your books generate millions, the temptation toward narcissism becomes overwhelming. Third, rapid growth prioritized expansion over discipleship. These churches excelled at attracting crowds but failed at forming mature believers who could recognize manipulation. The financial model was fundamentally unstable. Megachurches required enormous ongoing revenue to maintain operations. The staff numbered in the hundreds. The facilities cost millions to maintain. The production values demanded constant investment. When donations dropped even slightly, the entire structure became precarious, and donations were dropping. Giving patterns changed dramatically after 2008. The financial crisis hit suburban middle-class families hard, and they comprised megachurches' primary demographic. Millennials and Gen Z, who came of age during and after the recession, developed fundamentally different attitudes toward institutions and money. They witnessed megachurch pastors living in multi-million-dollar homes while preaching prosperity gospel. They saw the scandals. They asked hard questions about where money went. The Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability reported that overall giving to religious organizations peaked in 2007 and entered a slow, steady decline. By 2019, before the pandemic accelerated trends, megachurch revenue had dropped by an average of 15 to 20% from peak levels. Some churches maintained appearances by taking on debt. Others quietly sold properties or consolidated campuses. Then came 2020. The pandemic should have been megachurches' moment to showcase resilience. Instead, it exposed how dependent they were on the weekend experience. When governments prohibited large gatherings, attendance collapsed. Some churches pivoted successfully to online ministry, but they discovered something troubling. People watching at home didn't donate at the same rates. The physical presence, the emotional atmosphere, the social pressure, all contributed to giving patterns. Remove those elements and revenue dried up. But the pandemic was merely an accelerant on a fire already burning. The real crisis was cultural. The megachurch thrived in an America that valued size, success, and spectacle. It emerged during an era when institutions commanded respect, when television unified culture, when suburbs represented the American dream. That America is dying? Social media fragmented attention. Netflix and streaming services offered on-demand entertainment that made scheduled church services feel antiquated. The prosperity gospel message that resonated during economic expansion seemed obscene during recession and inequality. Young people watched megachurch pastors defend political positions they found morally repugnant. They saw churches fight to remain open during a pandemic while hospitals overflowed. The cognitive dissonance became unbearable. The statistics are stark. In 2007, 51% of Americans attended church regularly. By 2020, that number dropped to 47%. Among adults under 30, regular church attendance fell below 30% for the first time in American history. More significantly, the religious nones, people claiming no religious affiliation, grew from 16% of the population in 2007 to 26% in 2020. By 2023, that number reached 30%. Megachurches aren't just losing young people. They're losing credibility. A 2019 Pew Research study found that 57% of Americans believe religious institutions do more harm than good. The scandals, the politics, the hypocrisy all contributed to a fundamental trust collapse. When Lifeway Research surveyed people who left evangelical churches, the top reasons weren't theological, they were ethical. People felt manipulated, financially exploited, and lied to. Gateway Church in Dallas, founded by Robert Morris, represents the current crisis in miniature. Morris built Gateway into one of America's largest churches, with over 100,000 attendees across 9 campuses and revenue exceeding $120 million annually. In June 2024, a woman came forward alleging that Morris had sexually abused her in the 1980s when she was 12 years old. Morris initially denied the allegations, then admitted to inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady, while calling the abuse victim a young lady rather than a child. The church's board supported him until public outrage forced Morris to resign. Attendance immediately dropped by 30%. The financial impact was catastrophic. What makes the Gateway situation particularly revealing is the response. Thousands of former members described not shock but weary resignation. They had seen this pattern before. The predictable cycle of allegation, denial, minimization, forced resignation, and half-hearted apology had become familiar. The megachurch formula no longer generated excitement. It generated suspicion. Some megachurches are attempting reform. Andy Stanley's North Point Community Church in Atlanta has implemented greater financial transparency, publishing detailed budgets and salary ranges. Elevation Church, after criticism about Stephen Furtick's mansion, created more robust accountability structures. But these reforms face inherent limitations. The megachurch model requires a celebrity pastor. Transparency and celebrity exist in tension. The more people know about how the money flows, the less magical the experience becomes. The economic model is also fundamentally challenged by demographic change. Megachurches depend on suburban families with disposable income. But younger generations are delaying marriage, having fewer children, carrying enormous student debt, and struggling with housing costs. The family of 4 living in a suburban home with 2 cars and expendable income is becoming statistically rare. Without that demographic base, megachurches lose their primary revenue source. Real estate presents another crisis. Many megachurches own massive facilities that require constant maintenance. Willow Creek's campus sprawls across 155 acres with multiple buildings. What happens when attendance drops by half, but the facility costs remain fixed? Churches can't easily sell these properties. Who buys a building designed to seat 20,000 people? Several former megachurch facilities now sit empty or have been converted to warehouses and event spaces at massive financial losses. The multi-site model, once hailed as megachurch's future, is contracting. Life. Church, the pioneer of this approach, has closed several campuses in recent years. The video venue model feels increasingly absurd in an era when people can watch anything on their phones. Why drive 30 minutes to watch a sermon on a screen when you could watch it at home or watch something else entirely? Interestingly, while megachurches decline, smaller, more intimate church communities are growing. House churches, which meet in living rooms with 20 to 30 people, have increased by 38% since 2020. These communities emphasize relationships over production, discussion over performance, shared leadership over celebrity pastors. They cost almost nothing to operate. They're resilient to scandal because no individual holds excessive power. They represent a return to early Christian practice. Liturgical churches, particularly those in Anglican, Lutheran, and Catholic traditions, report growth among younger people seeking historical rootedness and ritual beauty. After decades of contemporary praise music and casual services, there's hunger for transcendence, mystery, and connection to 2,000 years of Christian practice. These traditions have accountability structures, theological depth, and aesthetic richness that megachurches cannot replicate. The irony is profound. The megachurch promised to make Christianity relevant to modern America by adopting business practices and entertainment values. Instead, it made Christianity disposable. When church becomes indistinguishable from a motivational seminar or concert, it loses the unique elements that made it compelling. The sacred became secular, and in doing so became unnecessary. Joel Osteen remains America's most visible megachurch pastor. His smile is perfect, his message relentlessly positive. But Lakewood Church's attendance is down significantly from its peak. Osteen's refusal to initially open his church to Hurricane Harvey victims in 2017 created lasting damage to his reputation. The optics of a multimillionaire pastor in a $60 million facility claiming it wasn't suitable for flood victims were devastating. Even his defenders struggled to justify the decision. Stephen Furtick still leads Elevation Church, but his 16,000 square foot mansion and lack of financial transparency generate constant criticism. Craig Groeschel maintains Life.Church's multi-site empire, but growth has plateaued. T.D. Jakes, once among America's most influential black pastors, faces declining influence as younger generations question his prosperity gospel message and political stances. The next generation of pastors recognizes that something fundamental has shifted. They're not trying to build megachurches. They're planting small communities, emphasizing social justice and rejecting celebrity culture. They publish their salaries, live in modest homes, and submit to accountability structures. Whether this represents genuine reform or simply better marketing remains to be seen. What is certain is that the megachurch era is ending. Not overnight, not everywhere, but unmistakably. The model that dominated American Christianity for 50 years is becoming unsustainable. The buildings will remain, monuments to an age that valued size over substance. Some will be repurposed. Others will stand empty, theological ruins in suburban landscapes. The deeper question is what this means for American religion. Megachurches didn't just entertain people, they shaped political movements, influenced elections, and defined conservative Christianity for millions. Their decline creates a vacuum. What fills it matters enormously. Will it be more authentic communities genuinely pursuing justice and spiritual formation? Or will it be continued fragmentation, with religion becoming increasingly privatized and irrelevant to public life? The statistics suggest American Christianity is entering a wilderness period. The comfortable alliance between evangelical Christianity and political power is fracturing. The assumption that churches should operate like corporations is being questioned. The celebrity pastor is becoming a figure of suspicion rather than admiration. This disruption is painful, but it might also be necessary. Robert Schuller died in 2015 at age 88. His Crystal Cathedral, the building that symbolized megachurch ambition, had been sold to the Catholic Diocese of Orange County in 2012 for $57 million. The congregation, bankrupt and diminished, couldn't maintain the facility. The irony is almost poetic. The man who pioneered the megachurch model lived to see his own creation fail. Bill Hybels, who built Willow Creek into an international influence machine, left in disgrace. His legacy is now primarily defined by the women he allegedly harmed. Mark Driscoll, after Mars Hill's implosion, attempted to rebuild in Arizona with the Trinity Church. He draws a few thousand people, a fraction of his former influence. Carl Lentz launched a podcast after his Hillsong firing, attempting to rebuild his personal brand. The response has been lukewarm. The culture has shifted. The appetite for celebrity pastors is diminishing. Meanwhile, across America, people are gathering in living rooms, in small churches, in parks and coffee shops. They're reading ancient texts together, sharing meals, supporting each other through crisis. They're not trying to grow to 1,000 members. They're trying to follow Jesus in ways that don't require production budgets or parking lots. It's not impressive. It won't generate headlines or television broadcasts, but it might actually be sustainable. The megachurch era emerged from a specific moment in American history. Post-war prosperity, suburban expansion, television culture, and institutional trust. That moment is over. We live in an age of institutional skepticism, digital fragmentation, economic precarity, and declining social trust. The churches that thrive in this environment will look nothing like Lakewood or Willow Creek. They'll be smaller, more accountable, less polished, and hopefully more authentic. The buildings remain, though. Drive through any American suburb and you'll see them. Massive facilities with empty parking lots on weekdays, attendance numbers that don't match the seating capacity. They're monuments to a failed experiment, the attempt to scale spirituality like a business. Some will adapt, downsizing and reforming. Others will close, their properties sold to developers who will convert sanctuaries into trampoline parks or self-storage facilities. What we're witnessing isn't just the decline of a church model. It's the end of an assumption, the belief that bigger is better, that success is measured in attendance and revenue, that faith should conform to market logic. The megachurch embodied American capitalism applied to religion. Its failure suggests that some things can't be commodified without being destroyed. Faith might be one of them. The story doesn't end cleanly because it hasn't ended. Thousands of megachurches still operate across America. Some remain financially healthy. Leaders insist the model is sound and scandals are aberrations. But the trend lines are clear. Attendance is declining. Revenue is dropping. Young people are leaving. The scandals keep coming. The cultural moment that enabled megachurches has passed. What comes next is uncertain. American religion is fragmenting in ways that would have seemed impossible 30 years ago. The religious nones continue growing. House churches multiply. Some people return to liturgical traditions. Others abandon organized religion entirely while maintaining spiritual practices. The megachurch era's end doesn't mean Christianity's end, but it does mean a fundamental restructuring of how faith functions in American life. The pastors who built these empires are aging. Osteen is 61, Furtick is 44, Groeschel is 57. Their successors will inherit buildings and systems designed for a culture that no longer exists. The challenge will be immense. How do you maintain a facility that seats 20,000 when attendance averages 5,000? How do you justify a 100-person staff when revenue drops 30%? How do you pitch a prosperity gospel during economic recession? You probably can't. And that's the point. The megachurch era is ending because its fundamental assumptions were flawed. It assumed people wanted religious entertainment rather than spiritual transformation. It assumed growth metrics indicated health. It assumed celebrity pastors were assets rather than liabilities. Each assumption is proving false. Professor Archive signing off. The megachurch story is still being written, but the ending is becoming visible. If this deep dive into one of America's most significant cultural shifts resonated with you, make sure to subscribe because we explore these kinds of untold stories every week. And seriously, what's your profession? I'm always curious who's watching these documentaries. Are you a teacher, a student, working in tech, healthcare? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.